We're going to be talking about American democracy and why it's so great that a few people own a lot of things. This story here is in the Financial Times. I want people to go and read it. If you can't, we'll give you the quick version of it. Bill Ackman says he wants to build a quote modern day Berkshire Hathaway. Investors seeking control of the U.S. real estate company and push to transform his hedge fund into a diversified financial group. Billionaire investor Bill Ackman said he's seeking to build a modern day Berkshire Hathaway. Um, Ackman's Pershing Square on Monday offered to buy millions of shares it does not already own in Texas real estate developer Howard Hughes Holdings in a deal worth over $1 billion. The proposed purchase is part of an aggressive push by Ackman to reinvent his hedge fund, which at present buys minority stakes in listed companies into a large financial group with the capacity to compete with powerful private equity buyers and other corporations on large takeovers. Quote, with apologies to Mr. Buffett, Howard Hughes would become a modern day Berkshire Hathaway that would acquire controlling interest in operating companies. Ackman said in an investor letter on Monday, referring to the company built by Warren Buffett. Pershing Square is seeking to lift its stake in Howard Hughes from about 38% to as much as 69%. The hedge fund offered to pay 85 per share, compared to Howard Hughes' $71.78 closing share price on Friday. Now, why is this notable? One, because Howard Hughes already owns a shitload of real estate across the United States. And Bill Ackman's company owns shares of companies all across the US in many, many different industries. But as they note in that piece, typically operates as a minority player instead of a majority player. Now he's trying to take over one of the largest real estate companies in the country to play an active role in those companies. So another example of people with too much fucking money, and we'll get into some of their ideas in a second, trying to get more and more influence over not just one sector, not just one part of the economy, but multiple, right? The concentration of not just wealth, but power and influence. And that's dangerous for democracy. It's dangerous for the economy. And it's also dangerous when these guys are fucking dumbass motherfuckers with a lot of bad ideas. So for people who don't know who Bill Ackman is, Matt, can you tell us?
Yeah. So there's a great piece in him from about a year ago in the Intelligence of New York Magazine. Raging Bill Ackman's fight against Harvard has made him the public face of a billionaire class anxious it no longer rules the world. Now, I think we'll find that anxiety was misplaced, given what he was able to do as a billionaire. There's a number of funny stuff in here, but starts off. Ever since he was a boy, Bill Ackman dreamed of becoming a businessman. He sold ads for Let's Go travel guides from his dorm room as an undergrad at Harvard and co-captained the business school crew team, which had oars decorated with dollar signs.
Jesus
Let's face up to what Harvard Business School represents, Ackman wrote at the school newspaper after the rowers were booed at the head of the Charles. We spend 90% of our studies on HBS pursuing the maximization of a dollar. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a man who was born without a soul, if that's all he's capable of thinking of. If you're getting booed on the Charles
Yeah.
River by a bunch of Harvard people who want to see you, you row some oars, like, come on, man. Let's continue a little bit. Ackman's senior thesis, submitted in 1988, looked at how admissions quotas to limit the Jewish student population in the 1920s echoed what some saw as unfair treatment of Asian Americans in the 80s. Ackman concluded that Harvard was admitting more students from other minority groups simply because it has been pressured to do so. He also critiqued the idea that the university was primarily a place for the transfer of knowledge. The
And
real, yeah, go ahead.
I'm just saying about the Ivies, that's absolutely not true.
Right.
The Ivy League schools in particular, the Ivy League schools operate as an entryway for a small select group of people to be influential both in business and in politics, right? It is not a place where you're going to, it's actually, you will hear from people who go to those universities. The idea is that like you've already worked hard and proved yourself before you got here. This is about cultivating your talents, as well as preparing you to be a member of the ruling elite. So talking about those universities in that kind of shining language is absolute BS.
Yeah, and we'll find out he has a pretty personal reason for doing that. But he says in his mind, and this is as a student, the real purpose of a university in a capitalist society was to distribute privilege. Ackman wrote, The question who should go to college should perhaps more appropriately become who is going to manage society. That is what it already does. And so what he's doing is trying to maintain that sort of goal. But why is he against these universities? Well, according to he sent his daughter to one of these Ivies and quote, she became like an anti-capitalist, like practically a Marxist, Ackerman said. I mean, the best kind of anti-capitalist. Ackerman said in January, leaning across a large conference room table at the offices of his hedge fund Pershing Square. We talk about capitalism and she would freak out at the table. His daughter was in the social studies department just like her father and rode crew too, but she had chosen to write her thesis on, quote, the concept of reification in Western Marxist thought, having come to very different conclusions than her father about how the world should work. Ackman said it felt as though she, quote, had been indoctrinated into a cult. And what actually happened is the bubble had been popped that she had been born into.
I mean,
Um,
it was just an amazing common theme with these guys, by the way. It's like,
yeah.
my daughter doesn't like me anymore, therefore I need to wage a war on the world.
Ackman believes that he has an army behind him, that everything he has been talking about, especially when it comes to DEI, is sort of what everyone has wanted to talk about but has been afraid to. And I just included that because you see a lot of people in this business repeating that exact same sort of phrase. And
Mhm.
the extent that it's sort of subscribed to among normal people is, I think, debatable. And maybe in
Now, what
Chicago,
are you talking about? Millions of Americans across the country are lining the streets saying, "Stop turning my daughter who goes to Harvard into make my daughter who goes to Harvard like me better."
I think most people are concerned with like rent and grocery prices and not DEI or whatever. Anyway, this past summer, Ackman, who invested $10 million in Elon Musk, so he is an investor of Twitter. I think that's one thing to note, as this guy's fame has been in large part stoked through his Twitter feed lately. This past September, Ackman, who invested 10 million in Elon Musk's takeover of Twitter, defended Musk against accusations that X had become fertile ground for anti-Semitism. Elon basically opened up Twitter, he said. The downside to a very open format is there's going to be some hate speech.
Mm.
Then October 7th happened. What launched Ackman's crusade was an open letter signed by more than 30 student groups at Harvard that began with the sentence, we, the undersigned student organizations, hold the Israeli regime entirely responsible for all unfolding violence. Ackman was one among many Harvard alums, including former university president Larry Summers, who were offended by the insensitivity of releasing the statement hours after 1,200 people were killed in Israel. Um, and Ackerman says the analogy is if the KKK kills a bunch of black people and you had people saying that the black community is so responsible. Now, no, that is not the analogy, Bill. The analogy, what is being said,
Jesus Christ.
like again, like this is not about Jewish people at all, at all. This is about, and he mentions like I don't think I included it, but he's sort of freaked out at the way people are talking about oppressed and oppressor, or maybe I did include that.
God,
Um,
it's crazy. It really is. I know that this is just such a personal pet peeve of mine, that this is what they sort of boil down Marxism to be, which is like that it's like the first philosophy. God, what a fucking weak tradition Western philosophical thought must be. If the first person who thought about oppressed versus oppressor was a guy named Karl Marx in the 1800s. No, this is actually like a very, very old idea. It's biblical, even. And Marx's conception is not that there is an oppressed and an oppressor, um, but rather that class stratification in society has been the engine of social change. This kind of like idea that like Marx is just
right.
going on about how like there's the good guys and there's bad guys, and the good guys need to get together, get rid of the bad guys, is a way to show that you have not read anything remotely influenced by Marx in your life.
Yeah, and actually, what he's responding to is this is all revolving around Israel. And this goes to basically the will to make it more complicated than it actually is. And when people say it's not complicated, Bill Ackman says, well, you're saying Jews are the oppressor. That's not what's being said. It's not Jews, it's Israel. It's the Zionist project of Israel in conquering land and settling it and removing Palestinians from it. That is just objectively, like Michael says, it's not hard to view what's going on here. It's not complicated. it needs to be complicated for your if you're a billionaire though.
Mhm.
And if you're going to say it's not complicated, then you have to reduce it to like, oh, it's because you have some sort of idea where Jewish people are the oppressors. That's not I citation needed on that one, Bill.
Mhm.
Get your AI geared up and find me the most prominent exponent of that on the left because I ain't fucking seen it nowhere. There are
Yeah.
anti-Semites who might say that shit. I don't see that on the
Hey,
left
guess
anywhere.
what? Actually, all those guys, are on your new team.
Yeah, they're on X and talking about it, and you were just fucking defending them,
That's
and
great.
they're right to say so because on the platform you invested $10 million in. So Ackman says Ackman argued he pulled out his phone to find a text he had received in October from another finance world executive asking if there was any way to get the names of the students in the organizations that signed these resolutions so I don't accidentally hire heartless morons upon their graduation. Do you have any ideas of how to publicly ask? As you know, I'm just a simple Yaley. Ackman took the call to X. Oh, let me make that a little bit bigger. Ackman took the call to X. The names of the signatories should be made public so their views are publicly known, he wrote. The next day, a right wing group parked a truck in Harvard Square with a screen broadcasting the names of students affiliated with the groups that had signed the letter. Ackman said he had no involvement with the truck. While Ackman's position got plenty of support, Ken Griffin, another Harvard billionaire, described in such a letter as unforgivable. Others wondered about the value of calling out students for hastily conceived open letter that had attempted to place the attack in broader context, which is what they did. I think Bill's getting a bit carried away. Larry Summers said at the time, asking for names, that's the stuff of Joe
And also,
McCarthy.
who is he?
Right.
No, I mean, like, seriously, who the fuck is Bill Ackman?
A
T
billionaire.
Yeah, I know, but, like, like, who is he, like, in relationship to the university, right? Is this somebody who's, like, a member of the community? Is he administrator? Is he a president? Oh, no, he's just somebody who has decided that he is going to insert himself, into the lives of young people,
Exactly.
without their consent. I mean, really just a disgusting individual.
And he toppled an administrator through a plagiarism scandal. It just continues some more here. Ackman offered advice to students. This is speaking last year. I would stay off social media, even though I'm not a good example. I mean, just a master hypocrite. Talking about free speech and then saying, "Well, October 7th, we need to shame these kids." He said that he was in a WhatsApp group with probably 50 billionaires that was very focused on Israel, and he cited Jared Kushner as another Harvard graduate looking for ways to economically rebuild Gaza. A WhatsApp group with 50 billionaires.
Mhm.
I can't help but think of what other leaders throughout history would do with information like that. But anyway, Ackman believes here's some just this big, beautiful brain on this Ivy League billionaire. Ackman believes that our lives are often fated from birth. I have a view that people become their names, he told me. Like, I've met people named Hamburger that own McDonald's franchises. We've been talking for nearly an hour and a half when Ackman asked me what my name was, hoping to offer a diagnosis. After he seemed momentarily stumped by my surname, I offered him my first name, which is Reeves, which he misheard as Reed. Reed? Right, he said, before turning back to himself. So my name is Ackman. It's like activist man.
Give this guy control. Give this guy complete control over America's future, please.
Now, I omitted the part where he gets into what I first heard of Bill Ackman, which is his wager against Herbalife. He shorted a company called Herbalife right
Mhm.
after realizing he needs to be an activist investor. And Herbalife, to be fair, is indeed
CEO's name
bullshit.
was named Herb. Sorry,
Right,
just
yeah,
very
yeah.
focused on it.
The nominative
Wait,
determinism. Yeah.
Herbalife was an investor in what?
Herbalife was absolutely a multi-level marketing
Yeah, yeah.
company. It was bullshit, and Ackman was right to call it that. But what Ackman was too stupid to realize is that money allows bullshit to defy gravity. So that if one of these billionaires decides he doesn't like your stupid ass and sees you take a giant short position of a company like Herbalife, and which is what Carl Icahn did, said, "I don't like Bill Ackman. I'm going to throw some of my money into this company." And Ackman lost $1 billion betting against a multi-level
A
marketing
supplement
company on
company,
that.
yeah.
Yeah. So now I think very clearly this is a guy who, I mean, he always talks about how he's like doing all this tweeting stuff about the Harvard presidents from the elliptical. And what you said is exactly right. Like, who is this? Why is Harvard uh, an
Which has a
institution older than this country,
and
which
has
has an
an in
endowment,
yeah.
yeah, like hundreds of billions of dollars, being cowed by these people. It is because, I mean, it's a
Because they are
pretty
these
insanely
people, you
display.
know?
Exactly. It's a display of the power of money, really.
Yeah.
One last thing, just someone else sent him the book America's Cultural Revolution: How the Radical Left Conquered
Oh, yeah.
Everything by Chris Rufo, the conservative activist who led the effort to stigmatize CR, critical race theory, and DEI. I started following people on Twitter. Ackman told me I started getting the download. So
Jesus Christ. I mean, and if you ever needed another example as to maybe why, we should turn these universities and, um, you know, turn Harvard into UMass Boston, uh, and Yale into New Haven, University of Connecticut,
yeah,
is the fact that these dumbasses with too much money and fucking time on their hands are having their entire worldview shaped by people like Chris Rufo, right? Who is not an intellectual or scholar,
yeah.
somebody who's like, hey, I went on twitter.com and I saw a bunch of things, and now my entire life mission has changed. Doesn't really scream to me. That's the guy I want to give the keys to the car of American society. And yet we do live in a country and a world where that's exactly how things go.
And he wants to buy up properties. I got to tell you, I don't like the idea that on top of all the other headaches in terms of finding a rental property, you have to
Have
worry
you ever
that,
said anything bad against
yeah.
Matt Leck going down that
So, oh, I didn't even talk about this. So the plagiarism thing that he got the
hmm
administrator Gay kicked out of Harvard for, he was saying, okay, I'm going to do an AI that is going to go through all of your dissertations looking for plagiarism. And then Business Insider said, hey, your wife or significant other, I can't remember if they're married,
hmm
plagiarized stuff too, it turns out. And what was Ackman's response? To say, you need to retract that, actually.
Yeah.
That's not fair. Crazy stuff.
Yeah, well, just like the law, plagiarism accusations only get to go one way, and that's towards my
Yep.
enemies. Yeah, I mean, just like a nasty, nasty guys, and I mean, a true villain. And the sad reality, though, is that we live in that person's world, and the only way that's going to change is once we smash that system up,
Yep.
and don't let people like that um, anywhere near kids, first of all, but also anywhere near the rest of society.